Welcome back, folks. It is the week of Jackson Hole. So Pete and I will give you our opinion on that boondoggle with the Kansas City Fed up there in Jackson Hole, and Jay Powell, what exactly he will likely do. We've got all that information for you and more on the Rebel's Edge. Bang!
All right. I'll tell you what, it's going to be a busy week, John. Last week was unreal. The performance of the market and the rebound of the market in such a short period of time was, I'll tell you what, it was not too far short from amazing. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And, you know, your VIX trade, Pete, how quickly that VIX came back down to earth. Folks, a week ago, well, not a week ago now, I guess, the 5th of August, it hit 65, the VIX did, the actual VIX. Today, it's under 15. Wow. That's a heck of a move, Pete.
Yep. It's amazing, you know, and there's just a lot, you know, there's so much news out there right now that's relevant, which is a little unusual for August, to be honest with you, but we're so focused on data and all the rest of it, John, that every single day is another going to be crazy kind of a day, including today.
Well, let's kick it off with the macro minute, Pete, which I'm going to say my macro is Jackson Hole. And it is that the Fed is still likely to cut by 25 basis points. Now, they've been having a back and forth, not a debate, but actual money passing hands back and forth on whether we might see 50 basis points instead of 25. That's still the minority opinion that we get 50. The majority still say that we're going to get 25 basis points. What do you say Jay Powell is going to tell us in Jackson Hole, Pete?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, John. And I think that is the macro side of the macro minute for me as well, just like you. I mean, it's about the data all the time. We know how important that's become. I'm not always saying that's the correct way the market should be reading things either, but it is how the markets and the algorithms are all tied in. So that's why we see these massive runs to the upside as well as runs to the downside. But the quarter point, John, I think that's probably, well, to your point, right now the CME says that at 77%, it's going to be a quarter, not 50 cents. Now, if we do the 50, that's about 22% or somewhere close to that. So still looking for that quarter point. But I think anything that comes out of Jackson Hole is going to be something that will be market moving. And we all know that those guys, they say they don't like to talk to the press. They love to talk to the press. They all want their name out there, no matter if it's the Minnesota guy, whoever, they all want their name in there in the print. And it says, well, you know, maybe. So I think that is going to be a very market moving this week because of what's going on there in the meeting.
Well, and so the 18th of September is what we're talking about, folks. We are no longer really talking any seriousness about an in-between meeting or an emergency cut. And because the market recovered so strongly, we went from almost 50-50 with 50% of the folks saying, yeah, 25, 50% saying, nope, 50, to now it's 77.5% saying just 25 basis points. So we will let you guys know if that changes. But right now, going into the 22nd, which is Thursday, that meeting in Jackson Hole, I think they're going to stick with that beat. Mm-hmm. All right. Fantastic futures. Pete talked about this one the beginning of the year because it started off low and it went real high, real fast. And that is cocoa futures. Cocoa futures are still up strong, 50% year to date, Pete, and they're up about 5% right now today. So that is my fantastic future.
I like that one. I like that one a lot. You hit on this a little bit. I'll go a little bit deeper on the volatility index, John, just because it is so important and people are finally starting to wake up to realize, oh, the VIX actually is relevant. You thought? It's amazing how many of these alleged smart guys with their mouths on television don't really understand the markets as well as they think. They can talk a good game, but I don't think that they really understand it as well, John. So anyway, we talk about sustainability, right? And it's very difficult to sustain. And just to give you a good example of that, in the VIX, August 5th, we hit 65 in the pre-market. August 7th, we were already at 27. August 13th, we were under 20. And now, we're sitting here underneath 15 in the upper 14s. That is the way the markets move. And it's a combination of a lot of different things. This may have been quicker than a lot of people ever would have expected, but you have to realize, we always get better, better, better. The algorithms are faster, faster, faster. These big chips are controlling a lot. And when you do all those things, John, the opportunities for this movement is there. It's just as much as the spike up to 65 as the fall down from 65 to the 14s. That's the volatility index. And I would say it's just about perfect in terms of what the predictive looks like right now. Are we looking for a little less than 1% move in the S&P? I'd say that's probably pretty accurate. Matter of fact, we've moved about 0.4%. So it seems to me like things are actually moving and the VIX is very accurate.
Yep, certainly accurate at telling us what sorts of moves the markets with the money that we've put on the table. Again, not opinion, actual money pushed across the table, buying either lots of calls, lots of puts, or selling lots of calls, lots of puts. All right, Pete, let's dive into AMD because this one's moving again. Advanced Micro Devices in a definitive agreement to acquire ZT Systems. It's about a $5 billion deal. I remember, Pete, when $5 billion deals were like magical. They were huge. Now it's like a footnote. You barely even see when somebody does a $5 billion deal, but they did. And I think you were saying, Pete, we just had some unusual activity in Advanced Micro Devices as well.
Yeah, a lot of the time we talk about what happened before. What happened before? Well, we're giving people a little bit of an opportunity today because this just happened not that long ago. AMD, here's what it looks like. Buying 10,000 of the 157.5 calls. Stock's a little bit lower than that right now at 153, but that's just a peek to see exactly what it is that we talk about all the time when it comes to this unusual option activity that we see in a lot of these various names. We cite it. We said we had it. Well, this is a bit of an example of something like that. The stock has been moving to the upside. They talked about this $5 billion acquisition. It's a big deal, John. It enhances the capabilities for AI. It puts them in a better position competitively with NVIDIA. I think when you look at that and the data center growth that they've talked about as well, I would say one thing. So the PE here right now is a 43. That's a little bit inflated. But when you really look at the growth that we have right now in AMD, I would say that that's okay to be at 43. Now, if that growth slows down into the future, obviously we're going to have to see that start to slide back a little bit. But for right now, it makes a lot of sense. And it's very close to where NVIDIA is trading as well.
Well, the AI feeding frenzy is not over, folks. As we detailed last week, most of the stocks that are impacted by the demand for either power or the demand for AI itself in data systems, data centers, and so forth, a lot of that is seeing massive bounce backs. I mean, super micro from $500 to $600. Micron, AMD, all of these. So yeah, ain't over, Pete. There's still a lot of juice in this one. But I do think you need to be prudent about when you buy. And now we're going to talk about one that people that had been prudent and did buy, ZIM Integrated Shipping, that's ZIM. We've had numerous hits on this one for unusual activity. None that were live right now, but take a look at a chart on this one, folks. ZIM was up huge in the pre-market today, and it continues to put up nice numbers as the demand for exactly what they do. It's up 24% at mid-session. The demand for what they do is extreme right now.
Yeah, profitable quarter. They raised their profit guidance, John. Anytime they do that, I mean, those are the words that people want to hear. That's what they need to hear. They can't always get it delivered, but in this case, they can. And this is it's really interesting. This guidance, their expectations that they raised absolutely dwarf where it was previously. So when you look at this, there's a good reason why this stock is moving the way it is. It's up about 23%. There are some fairly large shorts in here as well, call it 10 to 13%. It doesn't sound like a lot probably to people. It is a lot. When you start getting into double digits, 10% or more, that ends up being a fairly substantial amount of shorts there where the potential for a little bit of a squeeze starts to come into play. So I think that, along with the fact that they declared this cash dividend, John, there's a lot of reasons right now to be pretty excited about what ZIM, and maybe looking at some of the other shippers as well. Maybe it's not just ZIM, but I think that's something worth looking into, because for ZIM, things look like they're going really, really well.
And Pete, just crossing the tape a little bit ago, it's not a shipping story, but General Motors laying off another 1,000 workers. This is getting to be a pretty big thing. The amount of workers, sadly, that have been laid off in fast food, in fast casual, in sit-down dining, fancy dining, and so forth, a lot of folks being laid off, which again, doesn't really tell me that this is such a great economy right now, Pete. I just continue to point it out because others continue to tell us, oh, it's gangbusters economy. No, it isn't. It's great if you own stocks, but if you're not one of those people who has a lot in the stock market, this year is not feeling so good for you. All right, let's talk about TGTX, because they have just one drug, Pete, and it's a multiple sclerosis treatment, not a cure, but a treatment called Brivimundi. And this one gaining Food and Drug Administration approval in December of 2022. And sales have been growing rapidly. And it seems like every week, Pete, I see another jump out of this stock. And today, we're also seeing an Evercore ISI analyst give them a real thumbs up. And anytime some of these noted analysts in this space give you a big thumbs up or recommendation, that's something that drives the stock even higher.
Yeah, and this one, John, was one of those names that it hit its lows, obviously, like so many, probably August 5th, just a couple of weeks ago, when we had the markets were just sliding. The Dow was down 1,100 points, the Nasdaq was down huge, the S&P was down triple digits. It was $17. Now it's trading at $25. I mean, that's a pretty nice recovery, I would say. Their sales, to your point, very strong. Their earnings, they were expected to lose 2 cents. They actually made 4 cents. So I think that they are doing everything possible that they can. Now, the one caveat that I'd throw out there at least is when I look, there's not a whole lot of depth in the pipeline. They've got some stuff in the pipeline, but some of the issues that I see when we talk about the pipeline really kind of stand out because of the fact that it's so early. They are very, very early. They don't have a lot of different names sitting there in phase 2 or phase 3. A lot of them, they're much earlier. So I think that's something to keep an eye on as well. Like you said, John, it's just one drug, but people are absolutely flocking. And this treatment is doing extremely good things as of right now. So people are pretty daggone excited for the right reasons, I think.
Year to date, folks, sorry, not year to date, but the 52-week low, $6. Trading right around 23, 24. So when you have a stock that's up 400%, just steady Eddie, just climbing like this, it's worth noting. And that's why Pete and I keep calling attention to this one. All right. We have also spoken about this one a lot, Pete. XPEV. What is this? Well, it's EV vehicles, Chinese produced EV vehicles. And China's doing a cash for clunkers trade-in, Pete, where you can bring in your old vehicle. Maybe it's a stink pot. Maybe it's an EV that was one of the first generations, whatever. But they're giving you cash for that clunker, much as we did back in the day, Pete. And it's going to boost electric vehicle demand. That's certainly why we're seeing a lot of these EVs, China-based EVs for sure, moving from lower left to upper right now. They have a pure electric large 7-seat SUV, Pete, which is pretty big news. And obviously BYD and a number of others benefiting from this cash for clunkers.
Yeah, you know what? You put out incentives, it's amazing what things can happen, right? I mean,
Yep.
it's pretty incredible, quite honestly. And the fact that originally they were looking at maybe a loss of 43 cents. They're now looking more towards 18 cents on the loss side, John. Still a loss, but improving. The revenue's looking very strong. It wasn't about 700 million. Now they're looking at 1.1 billion. So that's another part where you can put the feather in the cap. By the way, 18 billion cash versus debt on the balance sheet. So I would say these guys are pretty secure. They can wave through a lot of different storms. The stock, however, they've seen some storms. This stock is not that far off of the 52-week lows. It's making a 3% move today, but let's be honest. The stock's been as low as 6.5. It's been as high as 20. Last I looked, it was somewhere in the low 7 maybe area. So it's definitely something good for the day. It's a great story, but it's going to have to follow through for this to actually have this stock start to move dramatically to the upside. And that's a long ways from the 52-week highs right now.
Yeah, it's turned pretty nasty for them at times, and it's been nasty for lithium. It's been nasty for Tesla, for Lucid, for Rivian, for a lot of these EV stocks have been taken out to the woodshed this year, Pete. Some of them have made nice recoveries. Tesla was one of those from the April lows at the 140 back up over 200, but pulled back pretty hard and now struggling still, I think, a lot of these EV makers. Mm-hmm. All right. We thought you guys would get a kick out of this because Pete and I love to kick around LeBron James, or at least I do. Maybe Pete's a nicer guy and he doesn't want to. But so back in the day, Pete, when you and I would watch Michael Jordan when he was with the Bulls, never saw any problems with Michael. But I see problems quite frequently where LeBron doesn't like videos of himself being shown getting dunked on. I never remember Michael trying to scrub those or Nike trying to scrub those. But allegedly, Nike and LeBron try to scrub any of these where it shows him getting dunked on. But our sleuth, Jared, was able to find an Olympic dunk right onto LeBron. So let's air that.
This video you're about to watch might get banned in a few hours. So bad. We all just seen Team USA basketball capture gold. But do you know what moment truly caught everybody's eye? It wasn't the U.S. going back and forth with France or Steph taking over in the fourth quarter. It was this. LeBron getting dunked on again. Now, why I say that's important is very simple. Every time you see footage of LeBron,
look at how he fell on the ground too. Boy, that was a huge run in.
There's a specific reason for that. Let's take it back to 2009, where LeBron James held his annual Skills Academy, where he hosts the top talent in the nation. Everybody who attends the camp is clearly starstruck by LeBron and his greatness, but not this guy. There was a young guard named Jordan Crawford, and he attended Xavier at the time. He was Jordan a hooper. Crawford. He was playing in a scrimmage against LeBron himself. He hit somebody with a move in the corner, drove to the basket, and he dunked on LeBron so hard that Nike had to confiscate the footage. Ryan Miller, the guy who recorded the dunk, told CBS Sports that shortly after it happened, LeBron called an older gentleman over, spoke something to him, and then he went up to Ryan and said that he needed to take the tape from him. Keep in mind, this is 2009. At this point, LeBron was the face of the league, and he had to protect his image by any means necessary. So just know when people say that those clutch vans be pulling up to people's cribs, they weren't lying. Fast forward to now, LeBron gets dunked on again, except that this is on a global stage. And as I'm recording right now, all videos of the dunk has been scrapped from the web. So it kind of makes
it does make you wonder.
It does kind of make you scratch your head, doesn't it, Pete?
It does. It does. All right. Well, that was fun. All right. We're going to go to college football, John. We're going to go, and the reason we're going to do it is this Saturday, Florida State, Georgia Tech kick off the college football season. And then the following Thursday, the 29th, and Friday, the 30th, and Saturday, the 31st, the games really start to kick off. And one of those games that I think is interesting because most of the time, the game one is a big name team playing somebody very small that they're going to probably beat up pretty good, and that's the end of the game and blah, blah. It's almost like preseason, right? But Clemson, number 14, is going to be playing number 1 Georgia. So that's actually a pretty daggone big one. And it's obviously right there, ACC. It's on ABC. It's 11 o'clock, Mercedes from Atlanta. That's going to be a biggie. But where I wanted to go with this, though, John, is this. I'm excited for it. I know you are as well. But Dabo Swinney has done something very interesting that not very many people are talking about. Dabo Swinney does not get involved in the portal. Everybody else loves the portal, from Alabama all the way to Washington to USC, all the way to Penn State. They are using the portal, and it's just this whole thing. I love this quote that I heard from Dabo, John. He said, "We sign guys who are transferring from high school." Now, I love that because that's the way it's always been, right? You go out, you find the best high school recruits, you bring them on. Maybe you get a kid who's a little bit younger. Now it's crazy because now there's a guy out there, John, who's offered by Texas $9.2 million of NIL money. He graduates high school in 2026. Yes, I said 2026. 9.2. He gets $2 million when he signs it, the letter of intent, and then $1.6 million each year after that. Not so bad. I mean, that's where we're going in this crazy sport, and what once was a great college sport. The money is absolutely flowing. But I'm just curious, what do you think? Forget all the other stuff. Dabo Swinney, he's avoiding this whole thing. He's still winning 9-10 games a year. Is he doing the right thing? He says most guys in the portal are not good enough to play for us, which I love that line because that's a cocky line. But I love the fact that he's out there and he's like, why am I going to go to the portal? I've already got guys better than guys in the portal. What do you think, though? Is he making a mistake? Because some of the alumni are not very happy.
Well, quite frankly, I do think he's making a mistake, Pete, because we've seen how now under these new rules, these players that do transfer, and Michael Penix being one of them, Pete, he was one of the top QBs in all of college football. He transfers up and goes to Washington and takes the Huskies that close to winning the national title. And he obviously gets a lot of accolades, gets drafted, and is playing great in the pros right now. So I do think he's missing out. I like the portal. The main thing I like about it, Pete, is not that, teams that have the NIL money that can stack their roster. I don't like that quite as much. But what I do like is if you're behind a guy that's like just a killer and you don't think you're going to see the field in a couple years unless he goes early into the NFL draft, I like the idea that those kids can go find a place where they can play. Now, that's not Michael Penix. Michael Penix was a fabulous quarterback, but he'd had some injury issues. And he decided, hey, I got one more shot. I'm going to go to the best team I can go to. I get it. And it wasn't a money thing. But I think for other players, when they're stuck at a place where they're not going to play and they're not going to be able to transfer to Debo and Clemson, Pete, because he's loaded with talent, I think it's good for those guys. By the way, like Pete said, Dublin, we kick off this weekend. It'll be Florida State favored by almost 12 over Georgia Tech. Yeah. And that's a 12 p.m. Eastern time game, which means basically an evening game in Dublin, Ireland, because it's probably about 6 hours ahead of the East Coast, 5 or 6 hours, I forget, Pete. But that should be a pretty interesting game, and I can't wait to see college football back on TV.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. I go back and forth on this whole portal thing. I think what they ought to do is be smart about, just like they are not smart about the NIL, you got to figure out a cap of some sort. And maybe you ought to have a cap of how many times can you get into the portal? Because we both know there are players who will jump in the portal every single year and then get a new deal in the NIL every single year. And I'm not sure that was the intent early on for what was going to happen, but that is what's happening out there. All right, we're going to jump to the NFL, John. There were 6 quarterbacks in the first 12 picks this year of the NFL draft, and they are all running and gunning and playing, and in some cases, winning the starting role. Now, J.J. McCarthy, in my opinion, was on his way with the Minnesota Vikings. He's out for the year because of a meniscus operation that he just got done doing. But I was curious what you think, John. I love the fact that Bo Nix, who everybody kind of this guy's, he's not somewhere in there. I don't know how that ever came up. I still think he was the most accurate, incredible quarterback last year. The only thing I could agree with would be, well, you look at his age, he's already 24, 25 years old, because some of these guys like he and Penix have been in college for 6 or 7 years, John. So it's a different world than it once was. They're not 21-year-old men anymore. Now they're 24 or 5-year-old geriatrics coming out. But anyway, Bo Nix has already been, they've said, hey, look, the head coach said he's our starter here for the Denver Broncos. I think that's pretty interesting. Caleb Williams, right in your backyard of Chicago, former backyard, he has looked good, but it's a very small sample set. But he has looked good. He's looked athletic. He's looked the role of the first pick in the draft. Adunze's unbelievable, so he's got receivers everywhere. I know guys get bumped and bruised, so somebody I think I saw more the other day was bumped around a little bit, but they've got all the talent there. You got Joe Milton and Drake May, and Milton sitting out there. He literally, John, was like the 6th or 7th round or something like that, and he's very competitive with Drake May, who was in the top group. So I think there's a lot of different quarterbacks that are going to be starting this year in the NFL, these young guys. Is there anybody stands out for you outside of probably Caleb? Because Caleb looks damn good, man.
Caleb looks great. Daniels looks great, Pete. And you and I were both on his bandwagon because I just thought that kid just had something special. Yep. And I still do. So is Daniels going to be like a Lamar Jackson kind of player, Pete? Is Milton going to be like a Tom Brady kind of player? Mm-hmm. Brady was taken in the 6th round. So these guys are not always, soothsayers, or they don't have a crystal ball. They're going by, various measures, in some cases, Moneyball kind of measures. In other cases, they just fall in love with a kid at the combine. Mm-hmm. But Milton is one of those guys. You said it, Pete. He came from Michigan, mm-hmm. And then transferred out of Michigan, I believe, right?
Yep, to Tennessee.
Yep, over to Tennessee. And he is a strong kid who's now a full-grown man, obviously. Mm-hmm. And he is dueling for that starting spot. You're exactly right. So, does that remind me a little bit? Again, I'm not saying he's Tom Brady, folks, but I'm saying it's a little bit like Brady's story where, mm-hmm. He slips down to the 6th round, Tom Brady, and this one, Milton slips even a little bit further. But I think they got a steal on this kid, Pete. And so that's the kid that I would watch, other than the obvious ones that we've already spoken of. But you were hot on Bo Nix forever, Pete. Mm-hmm. I love him. And I'm happy that Caleb so far has looked like the kind of kid that could really make himself a great NFL player as well.
Well, the great thing for you in Chicago is I think that he came to the right group because he's got a decent offensive line, great receivers, great tight ends. I think your tight end, Kmet's great. Good running backs. I mean, you've got a good situation for a guy to walk into. You're not dilapidated. You're not just completely garbage and you got a brand new quarterback. You've got a lot of pieces of the puzzle around him. So I think that's pretty exciting. Anyway, it's a lot of fun, man. And college football kicking off this Saturday is even better.
Yep, from Dublin, Ireland, folks. I just love, Pete, that we're getting back on the football thing, even though we've got the DNC in Chicago this week. You and I are more focused on football in Chicago than the Democratic National Convention, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for joining us, folks. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please send us some love through Twitter or YouTube or wherever you're watching or listening to the show. Remember, we're on Tesla Radio in 3 million cars across the country as well. So reach out to us, Pete's handle or mine on Twitter, and we will see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.